thanks everyone. It's really a pleasure for us to all be here. I'm Priscilla Martel and Charlie Vanover. For some reason, I got to be appointed to be a semi-moderator just to make this flow. So we've been given 3 questions that we'll answer by restaurant, and we'll do it in 3 waves. And we're going to start with the restaurants chronologically from the earliest ones that were open among our group. And the 3 questions are, first off, why did you choose Chester, which is really important for people sitting in a historical society event. Second question, best and worst memories about your business, incredible excitement, tragedies, etc. And then the last one, because it's 2022, who were the famous celebrities that came to your restaurant? And that's a light note to end on and probably get us going. So I'm going to say it is to Charlene to start.
So, we moved to Chester 53 years ago, and there was no real grocery store in Chester. It was Hawkey's Market. Any of you who are old timers will remember Hawkey's, and there wasn't much in the front as far as groceries went. All the excitement was in the back room. Anyway, in the 70s, my husband Bill was involved in setting up Sunshine Farms convenience stores. And in the process of doing that, he thought, why don't we have one in Chester? So we purchased the building. Hawkey had retired and was gone. And we opened up the Villager, which was a full-fledged grocery store. You could get just about anything. Including sandwiches, which were made at our meat counter. And 3 years into it, we went, wait a minute, the sandwiches are taking over the meat counter. The lady that wants her cold cuts can't get cold cuts. Half of our building, which we now owned, was empty. So we decided to do a sandwich shop, which became the Lunchbox, which became, at the time, the center of Chester. It was open from 5 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. The worst part of it was getting up at 4 o'clock to be there. And it took off from there. It had many iterations, I guess. A couple of people that work for me are here today. Lots of things happened there. It was Democratic headquarters for a long time, as many of you will remember. And it was a regular stop for anybody running for office in state and Washington. Sam Gadenson was a regular. He was there all the time. As far as important, memorable people, there were so many.
Johnson Hardy.
Well, there were 3 groups. There was the 5 to 8 group, and they were the working class. They came in, they had their coffee, their breakfast, some got their lunches. A lot of business transactions transpired. I need a septic system at my house, John, what's gonna happen? The next group came in 9:30 to 11, and they were all the retired people. And they knew how everything should run. They would run everything. Then from noon to 2, it was people coming in for lunch. We did a daily special in addition to our sandwiches. I made a fresh soup every single day. And that was how the Lunchbox ran. In the course of the 30 years that I was there, who were the famous people that came through? Of course, Morley Safer. And the first time I met Morley, this is a cute story. This person came in, looked around, had some bags with him, floppy hat, went over to get coffee, and in my usual, if you're gonna stay, you can use one of the cups, otherwise please use one of the plastic paper ones. So he poured himself a coffee, he went over, took a New York Times. Person sat at the window, drank his coffee, read his paper, came up to the counter, opened his mouth to ask for a donut, and I went, oh my God. We became friends. I soon learned that Morley didn't want people to know who he really was. And shortly after he arrived in Chester, we had our winter carnival, which was a very busy, important time in town. And people were just loaded into the lunchbox. And these 3 women came in giggling and happy and came up to the counter and said, does Morley stay for coming here? And I went, yeah, sometimes. I said, can you tell us who he is? Sure, sure. And at the time, Max Showalter was in town, and he was at the corner. He loved the attention. So I directed these 3 women over to Max, and he was entertaining them as Morley walked through the door. So Morley came over and he poured his coffee, and I kind of went behind him and I said, exactly how much is it worth to you? I don't tell those 3 women. He had a scarf on, because of course it was winter, the scarf on up over his face. He said, I'll pay you tomorrow. And he left. So I will let John carry on. I understand we're going to have a question and answer period. I'll turn it over to somebody else.
We can go either way, your call.
Okay. Well, I didn't own the Inn of Chester. I happened to grow up in a house that became the Inn of Chester. And that happened because in 1981, the year we got married, Doreen and I, my mother passed away. And my father said, well, it's cold in the winter, whatever it is, I'll add some beds, some bedrooms, we'll do a B&B. To no one in particular, he said that to. And then he started building rooms, which was 20 at the time, and it got, I believe, halfway through. And he said, gosh, this economics doesn't make any sense. 20 rooms with food service, and you can't do it that way. So then, I think another 25 rooms, conference facilities, and the restaurant, the bar, etc. So that then, because he liked historic preservation, leads us to the chart house in reverse order. The chart house in 1969, I believe, he purchased it from Roger Gladden. And it was basically, back then, it was just this beautiful building overcome with weeds growing up to the first floor. And he was a historic preservationist and had done a number of things in town and just didn't want to see that fall in total disrepair. Initially, I don't know if anybody here knows it, but this was potentially going to be an office building. It wasn't going to be a restaurant. It was just going to be a building preserved for some purpose, and he thought that might be it. And then somehow I ran into the chart house folks. And this became restaurant number 9, the first restaurant on the East Coast, an organization founded by underwater demolition experts. So they knew how to bring teammanship from the West Coast to the East Coast, and their culture was most amazing. It had a material impact on a number of people who worked in the organization, and it changed Chester to the extent that it was an outlet for people to learn to work together as a team in the most incredible way, where if you were a broiler man, what they call a broiler man, probably a broiler person today, well now they call them chefs, but back then you could be 18 years old and cooking 650 dinners. That's what one person and someone else dishing the plates out could do. That's how efficient it was. If you knew how to do it there, I went to New Haven and helped Dave McCourt open up that restaurant, and I also worked in Boston cutting meat for the chart house chain there. Once you were certified, it was changeable parts. It was fascinating. That's the mechanics of it. It was just a fascinating scenario. the Chart House organization ended up going public and had over 80 some odd restaurants. Chester broke the record in terms of number of meals on a single day, over 1,200. And this is according to Dave McCourt, who ran all the restaurants at one point as an executive vice president for the organization. We chatted last week, but they were doing 450 dinners a night on Friday and Saturday night. People were falling asleep on the rock downstairs. If you've ever been down there, there's this big boulder. It was a 2.5 hour wait back then. So, and then other things have happened. In terms of best memories, from my profession, if I have one, is helping organizations who are in trouble, and a lot of it's all about people. I learned pretty much everything about management and leadership from working with people in a team through the Chart House organization. I reached out to 2 people in preparation for today. One was John Krim, who married one of the Marshalls, Mary Marshall, and of course, Marshalls were all in all the Chart Houses all over the country. And this guy, Dave McCourt, who could be here today. And these people had a lot of experience here, and they said Chester Chart House was the role model for all Chart Houses, breaking records, which is amazing. This is Chester. So these guys were in Coronado and all these fancy places. Okay, the worst kitchen disaster, one of the questions, it was only me doing this with a knife and not paying attention. I had a scar still right here. So that answers the question from a personal perspective, but absent that, I can't tell you. In terms of famous people, I asked those 2 gentlemen. I remember Phyllis Diller on table 15 or something. And she didn't have her wig on, and if you remember Phyllis Diller was like that. She was very kind of subdued, and then she opened her mouth. Ed Norton, also Hubert Humphrey was also there, which must have been towards the tail end of his life. That's it for me.
How about your shirt, John?
Yeah, mention your shirt. Also, about one other thing. Does everybody here know what the Chart House is today? And also, I'm not sure, and this is the editor again, sorry, fact-wise, did you give us the dates of when it opened? I'm trying to remember if you did it, the same as Charlene, and does everybody know where the lunchbox?
Chart House opened in 1972. According to your notes, Doublage opened in 79, Lunchbox in 1980, but way before then in various forms. In Chester in 1982, and Gerry bought the wheat market in 86. This is per you, edited by you to the editor.
But to second that, tell the public a little bit about the Chart House menu and your shirt and everything, just for the context.
It still fits. So I have several of these. Doreen didn't let it out for the occasion, but I think it was large, extra large for you when I initially wore it. One of them I did donate to the Historical Society. Did you pick the
green one?
The green one that's kind of, yeah, that's a bizarre one. Check that one out. And I've got several of these. You can have as many as you want. These are collector's items. But this was the uniform if you were a broiler person and you worked also in the front as well. You have this uniform on with dark pants and not these, but topsiders, but the cream colored ones, which was really weird, which meant you had to keep them clean. And maybe that's the reason why. So
That was good, yeah, and what was the other
menu?
The menu.
Describe the food a little, please.
okay, wheat cut, I was also a wheat cutter. And by the way, when you want to learn a trade for Chart House, you did it at your own expense, because that way you get put on the schedule. And if you weren't prepared, there were other people who wanted to. So I ended up learning a lot of things for no money, which was really, really worth it. Cutting meat is one of those bizarre things. So we had to cut our own meat. They came in big boxes from Iowa beef processors and XL. They would come in these big cryovac, they call them butts. They're 10 to 13 pounds, I guess, a piece. And you break them down a certain way. and they were turned into the sirloin steaks. Everything in Chart House was utilized. The sirloin steaks weighed, as I recall, between 10 and 11 ounces. That's after it was perfectly trimmed. If it didn't make weight, meaning that it was too sloppy and it wouldn't be a good steak, then it would be used for a combination dinner, which would be 6 to 7. Somehow I remember these numbers. Nothing else, 6 to 7 ounces.
Are you taking notes?
And that'd be coupled with an Australian lobster. So Australian rock lobster was also grilled on there. We also teriyaki these things, so we made a really interesting multi-level teriyaki sauce with a bunch of ingredients that took a long time to do. And then we would marinate those sirloin steaks for about an hour and a half. We also had chicken breasts. I know it's a bit of a story. You end up really learning about how to do things right and consistently. But they had chicken breasts that were very simple. Hawaiian chicken was basically the teriyaki chicken, marinated and then grilled with a slice of fresh pineapple that was also grilled. And when I say grilled, there was a process for doing everything consistently. So you could cook a rare steak and a well steak at the exact same time for 13 minutes with 3 turns. And given the angle of the grill, you would learn that you can make all these things happen and do 750 dinners. Other items were beef kebabs. So if that 6 to 7, I'm sorry about the mic, 6 to 7 ounce strip didn't make it because it's too bristly, that'd be cut down to 2 to 3 ounce pieces for beef kebabs that had to meet certain standards. And those were marinated. We had halibut that was frozen. Lots of jokes about halibut. I don't know why, why do you have it just for the halibut? So it goes on and on, but that was done very simply with just some butter and lime juice wrapped in foil and thrown on the grill. We also had ratatouille, which was a huge process to do with a bunch of different fresh vegetables, and if you didn't pay attention, you would burn a pot, and you only do that once. Very similar to stock pots too. You throw it out once when you're a pot washer, then you realize if you're going to progress, you just check. And the mud pie. Anybody remember the mud pie? Raise your hands. Okay. And what was so strange about that? It wasn't anything magic, although it always tasted so good. And the recipe was very simple, a very simple recipe, which I'm not going to tell you. But you can look it up or we can talk afterwards. Anything else about, the Kyoto coffees. The artichokes were done the artichokes were boiled, not steamed, they were actually boiled with red wine vinegar, water, oregano, salt, pepper, and I don't know, maybe someone else knows. But served with a ramekin of butter and a ramekin of mayo and a lemon. You didn't have to even request that, it just came that way. Any more? I'm taking up too much time.
I don't think you mentioned the prime rib.
The prime rib. Who remembers the Callahan cut? Callahan was named after John Callahan, who was VP of Operations, who was one of the first senior people to come down here. And then there was a regular cut, which was I think a 10-ounce piece. We typically had that on the weekends. And if you know much about food business, typically on a Monday or Tuesday, the pot roast that you're having is obviously fully utilizing the leftovers. Oh, and one last item. If the 2 to 3 ounce piece of beef that you're wondering about didn't make weight, the quality wasn't right, and you would get written up, you didn't want to screw around with that, then that became ground sirloin. And so they served really good hamburgers back then with the real products. So everything was fully utilized, and you would know the yield on your scrap. Even as a little kid, I learned about percentage yields. So that's what I said, had a big impact, not just on the culinary satisfaction of people, but the lessons learned there were absolutely phenomenal. And I could go on, but I'm not. I did it from when I was 16 through college. Different places to pick up money. Hello.
Hi, Gerry.
chicken salad. Chicken and grapes. Very popular. Thank you.
Did you want me to go sequentially? No, I'm asking.
I've already started this. So, the wheat market, I started out as being a customer at the wheat market. It was located up in Tylerville. There were some problems there with the building, and they moved down to Chester. And they found that little spot back there. It was a new addition to that old building, the old Fieldstone building. And there's two restaurants there. One was a breakfast nook at the very far end, where Fiddlers went eventually. And then the wheat market. The wheat market was initially set up to be, it did have a delicacy. It had some very fine beefs and meats and other things, but also a lot of jellies, jams, olive oils, and cheese. He had 2 big cheese cases in there. And I wasn't there for those. I was there because he did a real beautiful roast beef. He roasted that thing up and always came out medium rare. And it was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So when he moved his business down here, I lived in Moodist and I followed him down here. You know, that's where the roast beef was. And then I had been at that time involved in the restaurant bar business, and that was becoming a chore, you know. And so I asked him one day, I said, "Do you need any help here?" He goes, "Yeah." And I started working at the wheat market. And there were similarities. It had a bar in between me and the customers, you know, but at the restaurant business, you know, they would come in angry and leave happy, or happy and leave angry. But in the food business, it's more like chomping away. This is good. A bag of chips in your hand and a chicken salad sandwich. And that was the biggie. That was the thing that really became very popular at the wheat market, was this sandwich. It came out of a cookbook. I won't tell you what it is, but and so, you know, it became a neat story. And so when I bought it, you know, the guy was overextended. His name was Anthony Gioco. And he was a teacher up in Middletown, had a new wife, tried to open up the lobster, the place up at Cedar Lake there. He was just spread out too much. And I ended up buying this wheat market. So I pushed the cheese cases away. I made them go away. I stuck them in a corner, and I found a few tables, and I put tables in. And we got back to the sandwich making thing, and letting people sit down there. Now, that became quite nice. There was 3 tables. Now there's 8. Well, there are 8 tables, but you can't use them anymore because of COVID. Or the lingering effects of COVID is what it is. They don't want to have people sitting there. They've been successful with their business. I'm not here to talk about what they're doing, but you know, the table did make a big change in the place. And I enjoyed the hell out of it. I made sure I had some music in there. You know, changed the menu as necessary and added some new things, and it became quite a fun place to me. There was an exercise parlor upstairs, images. They used to make the ceiling thump. Right? And so I would have an apple pie in the oven just to piss them off. They could smell the pie, or roast beef or something, you know, and they would thump the ceiling some more. And, you know, but it was good. They would finish exercising, and all these tiny little bodies from Essex come down and they start working out muffins and coffee and everything, you know. And what'd you have in the oven? What was in there? But they were good for business. They were good for me. And we were talking about restaurants a little while. I mean, we are talking about restaurants. But I remember one of the women said to me, "Oh, this is so good, Gerry. This is so nice. It's like a restaurant training ground." Right? Because they bring their kids in, and the kids run around and do laps in the store. I had a little dust buster on the wall. They grab it, suck up the rug after the kid. So I trained them too, I guess. They were training their kids on how to be in the store, and every once in a while I'd have to talk to the child or the mother. You know, the kid can't be putting his hand in a candy jar. You know, so it was a good experience for me, and I got to learn this town, and to know this town, and in learning this town, and knowing I watched so many people. I've been involved with this town in that business on there for almost 35, 40 years or so. I lost track, but I've watched these people come in, move to town, enjoy it, and say, this is so cute, this is so nice, blah, 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 start raising kids, and now their kids are coming in. You know, they're still coming into this place, because you can ride your bike downtown, you can walk downtown, you know, and, you know, that guy behind the counter, he ain't that weird, but, you know, he's okay, you know, this is all right, you know, and not only that, but if you don't behave, I'll tell your parents when they come in, you know, and so you get, it works. You know, it really works. You know, you get to you see these young people go away to college, and they come back and they still know. You know, I like that #2 sandwich. You know, or the chicken and gravy. It's always the damn chicken and gravy. It's good. I know. You know. So, you know, you talk about the not so much. We've had our celebrities come in, and they mentioned several of them. You know. But to me, the celebrities are guys like him, you know, and others who made this town, who go there and come in and say hi, and then, you know, you know, they're friends, you know. You know, I was able to meet the vice president of the local bank. I saw him here somewhere. Bruce is here. Yeah. Well, one day he called me into his office and said, "Oh, what's he want me in the bank for?" You know, but I was getting to meet the vice president of the Chester Bank. Oh, well, that's kind of cool. I go up and I sit there and talk to him in his office upstairs there, and he says, "Why don't you get involved with the Chamber of Commerce? And you could work with me and, you know, learn some more about the town." Francine, my accountant there, she says, "You know, you should join the Chamber of Commerce." When they were looking, she's sitting with me in the store one day, and we're looking at a poster on the wall that says there's a Collmore series up here in the green. Is going to be this weekend, and lunch boxes provided by Finbush. I said, "What's that doing there? Why is that in my store advertising Finbush?" Do you remember this? She said, "Why don't you join the Chamber of Commerce and get involved with this whole thing?" So I did, you know, and then Finbush never advertised in the wheat market again. It's always been a great experience. I love the hell out of it, and you know, those who know me, you know that I'm not far. I still work in town. I just don't work at the wheat market anymore. After so many years, I had to get out, and the COVID thing was a good time to get out. And also, I think I celebrated a major birthday. You know, so get out the door, and then I just went across the street working in the package store. So I can still watch the back of the wheat market and know what's going on. So it's you know, I couldn't think of a better place to be. And I've lived a lot of different places. You know, I lived in Hawaii, I lived in Nashville, I lived in Houston, upstate New York. I keep coming back here. This is a neat place.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
That's line. We want it line. I don't mind. It will. Indulge me. There's a few people in the room that might stand up. Les lumières, les fleurs, c'est le moment, tout le monde arrive. Just a second, I know I can do this. Modern technology, it's worth it. What am I doing? That was the music that we love to put on among many, many pieces to get
us going right before we opened the door, Restaurant du Village. Because Restaurant du Village was theater and food and friendship and all these great things. That's why this half of the room worked with us. So why did we come to Chester? We have 3 questions to answer. Charlie will have more to editorialize on. We were working in Essex and we wanted this French country restaurant, so we needed a certain kind of atmosphere and something that really could be part of the community and be like a French country restaurant. So one of the first places we looked at is where La Maria is now. And many of us will remember it was a kind of a shabby Chinese restaurant in an old steakhouse. So that was a big project. We also looked in Stonington, which is a cool town that has a similar vibe, different, but we were worried about that wasn't a good community too far from where our fans were. And then Walter Grau, who owned Otto's when it was Otto's name is Walter, bumped into Charlie and, oh, Charlie, and we looked at Otto's, this charming little building, all intact, with the funky old bar and tables, and it just had the right vibe. And Skip Hubbard mentioned it in the article that was written in a local paper about Chester, and Charlie said it for years. There's something wonderful about the intimacy of Main Street and the fact that it curves. You know, you're kind of trapped in there and you have a little bit of an excitement when you turn a corner, you don't know what's gonna come up next. And then, I mean, the fact of who's here and what Gerry just said and how we all applauded, Chester is such a great place to be part of the community. So that's the answer number 1. Number 2, up and down. So first, for those of you that don't know, that are a little newer here, if you saw Restaurant du Village when the Kellers owned it in the 90s and the 2000s, that was pretty close to what we had. You know what it looked like and felt like. And that's very different from what you see now, and very different from any kind of restaurant you can eat in around here anymore. You know, people serving with a lot of care and how the service is done, French classics, country food, maybe not politically correct by region, but representing different regions. And for us, it was really about making the best food and the best time. And we are the prime representatives of the best time because we did have a very good time. So the highlights, okay, so highlight. For the highlight was making the guests happy. Truly, truly, I mean, what could be better than those people leaving really content and praising something? But then the day that they called the sweetbread McNuggets, and when you got a letter when it was someone's anniversary before they died and you ruined everything. You know, those things really, really hurt. I still have the letters because I always want to know that I'm not perfect, in case there was any. This is my mother channeling here. More highlights. So I want to think about you before I think about us. We were recognized, and 5 French chefs of very, very high regard thought it was worthwhile enough to come to Chester, Connecticut and cook dinner with us. And 2 of those men, well, Michel Boston, his daughter, they're multi-starred Michelin chefs right this minute in Paris. Another guy, the best, most famous chef in Lyon, he retired. So these people felt it was worthwhile, and we all know what that experience was like in the 80s. So that was a pretty high moment. And then another high moment, I know I can come up with a lot more negative ones. We used to have something called Disco du Village. This is a different playlist, but you entered through the alleyway, you know, where the gates are, and that was the bar. And we rolled up the carpet and locked the door. Now, some of you guests might be in there still because you wanted to be part of this Disco du Village, if we let you. And we would dance to reggae and French pop till whenever. And we did this more than twice, just so you know. There was and then we can think of all these times. That one time, I don't know if it was a Beaujolais dinner, there were fireworks rolled down the alleyway. The police came. I don't know how much the rest of you know. And then let's bring back to Chester and really what we all experienced. The flood was pretty scary. The flood in the early 80s. That night, Diane Carroll was here because her daughter was graduating from Wesleyan. Lovely lady, she's in the bar, we're clustered in the back. The window looks at the creek. The creek is lapping the building. Yes, Ms. Carroll, I think you should leave now. And we saw as the evening wore on, we saw red check tablecloths from the paddock go by. We saw a stove. I mean, it is funny, but it isn't. And basement, and did, so much more serious damage. That was a pretty much of a down moment. And then our last question before we open up to Q&A for us, famous people. So they come in categories which we've tapped on. First, the Goodspeed's presence here. That's why, what's his name? I had it in my, he sat on table 8, helped me out, the big, Andrew Lloyd Webber and his muse. They would sit on table 8, that's the one where the floor sloped, and if you dropped your glass, it might roll down. Werner Klemperer from, one of those TV shows, and it was a cool day when Mary Martin came on a Sunday afternoon, and we sat in the restaurant dining room. There was, of course, Paul Newman, that's the most famous one. Michael Price from the Goodspeed brought him and said, please, please, put him with his back to the room, in a corner, he's always mobbed. Paul Newman comes in, sits right here. Every woman in the restaurant is looking at him. He then saunters back to the bar to get some more to drink, swagger through. So he really knew how to play his presence. But the Goodspeed was wonderful for all of us to bring these exciting people. Then we have in this area, and I think it still lingers, but we had all these people from CBS, starting with Charles Kuralt, who lived in Essex. So he came, and then Morley Safer moved in the 80s, and Robert McNeil lived in Westbrook for a while. I think it was Westbrook. That's the NewsHour. So there was a whole contingent, and then the politicians, for us, all politicians from everywhere of all parties. And I won't go into any detail, but yeah, of course, well, the governor and we put these things in the exhibit. Ella Grasso patronized a little pub this Scottish guy owned in Essex. That's where we first started cooking. And and let me just finish out. Let me put it in time. This is why I get to be the main delivery assistant. She was really a great customer. She came to this funky bar, because they lived in Old Lyme, and was a really good customer. And when we left there, she went to look for us to have a meal, and we weren't there, and she left. So she came to Restaurant du Village, and you can see that she signed the guest book, and there's a nice little note she left us, which I'd forgotten about, but going in the basement and getting all this stuff. But I want to tell you, I think we need to hire John. Maybe he could do some consulting around here for, food cost percentage and how to get a good value and a piece of meat. So I've answered the questions, and I thank you. So I think we want to open it up, right? And let the public ask away.
What did you say about Goodspeed and Norman Terrace? Has the closure of Norman Terrace had any impact on business?
Since none of these are working.
If anybody heard that question, anybody see it?
I'll repeat it if we get the mic. Okay. So Fritz asked us whether the closure of the Norman Terrace had any impact on the restaurants, but I personally can't say because I don't operate a restaurant. Anybody know?
They came in mostly during the summertime. They did like 3 shows.
Jerry, could you speak into the mic because they're recording?
So,
Thanks.
3 shows. Working there. So, we saw them over the course of the summer, but after that, they weren't around. We saw a lot of the techies and some of the up-and-coming acts. I mean, Mark Campbell came in when he was in one of the early shows there. So, John Williams and a few others, they would come through. Mostly it was the people working the stage, and then also customers who got in. There were some who come on a regular basis, and they made sure they stopped at my shop and did a few other things, get an ice cream or whatever, and then go to the show. So, there was a restaurant that did open up with that whole intention. It's called the Side Door, and they were going to be the restaurant that I was going to deal with.
It was called the Theater Pub first.
The theater. I'm sorry, excuse me. It was, yeah.
Charlie opened it.
Yeah. Okay. And Bill Conchon, I think, was involved with that too. But they opened up with the intention of being there for the theater, and the theater being so seasonal, Yeah.
Charlie, can you tell us a little more about the theater pub?
and I decided we would go into the restaurant business. So it started out, I said, let's get some jobs. And she, her first job was down one of the big restaurants by the water. And she got this great big knife, which we still have, and this and that. And then I knew Jock at the Theater Pub, and I said, you know, can I come in? I can help you out and everything else. And he said, fine. And we started cooking there, and it became more and more popular. And again, a lot of people who became our clientele at Restaurant du Large ate there, and including Ella Grasso. And she just didn't come down there. She came down with her limousine in the front of the pub with 2 state cop cars and everything else.
And how did the theater pub, that was what Carrie was curious, how did the theater pub idea in the 80s come up? She's asking about.
Okay, so to make a long story short, that kind of gave us the reputation. And we had Restaurant du Large, and Bill Cochin owns that building where the Restaurant du Large was. And where the
Theater pub was.
theater pub. And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, you know, I have an idea for an English pub, the theater pub. We have bangers and, you know, beer, steak and kidney pie, the whole works, Scottish eggs, etc. And that was successful enough. The problem was, I've always thought the restaurant does best, and excuse my expression, when it's down and dirty. Okay? And Bill Cochin had a huge propensity to scrub everything. Everything was clean. So in any event, we parted ways, and you know, it was fine. I said, Bill, you take it over. And Bill saw me about a year later. He said, I took it over and I lost $100,000. So that was that.
Where was that?
The theater pub was on North Main Street beyond the column buildings going up that way. And it was timed to open when the Norma Terrace Theater opened. And I'm going to say it from a different perspective. It was a terrific idea. Some people may tell us the food was even good and it was a great place, but there was just not the population to support. And because our culture for dining out has really, really changed in the 30-odd years since then. We have a totally different perspective to eating out now than we did then.
Had I had my druthers, because Restaurant du Large was considered uppity up and everything else, you know, and I thought about it, we discussed it a little bit. Still didn't want to dilute Restaurant du Large, but what we should have done, in my opinion, was open Bistro du Large. And had we done that, I think it would have been a total success.
A debate for the ages.
I'm always right in these matters.
What's the cuisine? What would work?
Oh God, don't ask these questions.
I'll be brutally honest. In 1,000 years, I wouldn't go back to the restaurant business. Because first of all, we had great help. You saw them in the audience right now. We had, you know, the restaurant represented something. Plus, we had clientele that came all the way from Rhode Island, Hartford, Fairfield County, and everything else. And I'm sorry that audience does not exist anymore. So I personally wouldn't go near the restaurant business.
But to say why? Look at this room here. I mean, most of us in glancing, there's a pretty high representation of older people, number one. Number two, so that, you know, there's a different generation, some of whom are here, with maybe different tastes. And there are restaurants everywhere. So when we were open, right, I mean, you couldn't really eat a great meal in West Hartford, so people thought nothing of getting in the car and coming to Chester, or the Weekenders, etc. But now, I mean, there's great restaurants in West Hartford, there's restaurants on the shoreline, it's just so totally different. Plus, we eat very differently. We have many more choices, and we have different appetites, whether it's a sushi night or, you know, finding some weird noodle joint. You know, it's just radically different. Do you all agree with me? Yeah. I mean, we all agree. It's just so, it's like different.
But Chester is a destination location. I mean, take a look in the summer, go walk out here on a Sunday and try to get parking anywhere near downtown. The cars are in the Goodspeed parking lot. And so, you know, there was some thoughts that I had years ago about what happens when another restaurant opens up in Chester. And, you know, is it too much competition? And I'd be interested in what you guys think, but it seems to me that the more restaurants you have, the more of a destination you become. And I don't think any restaurants in Chester are hurting, and business seems to be absolutely booming.
I think one of the reasons is we have a variety of restaurants. They're really not in competition with each other. You can get just about any kind of food you want in Chester, and that makes a difference.
Charlene, did you ever get any hot tips on horses?
Yup. During the Triple Crown series, there was a group of gentlemen who I purchased a paper called the Racing Form for. And they would gather around one of the corner tables, and boy, would they go through that racing form. And they would pick who they were gonna bet on, and actually was a local bookie. Surprise, surprise.
You were a police chief at the time, weren't you?
You know, we didn't have to go there.
Oh,
Yes, I was. One of the many hats I wore at the time. But he would leave the lunchbox and take up residence at the Patagon. And everyone would go in, he had a set seat at the Patagon. And they would all go in and place their bets. But all the hard work was done over coffee at the lunchbox. Good question. And you were one of them.
You can't see.
Charlene, you know, you said that Morley Safer wanted to be incognito or whatever. It was easy to tell when he was there because he was constantly double parked. And often in that Ferrari.
Did everybody hear that?
He also drove a Ferrari
Yeah, when Marley
or a
was
pickup
there,
truck.
usually the red truck
Yeah. but he
was
also had a-
always double parked. Marley never pulled in a parking spot. There could be plenty available, but he never did. He parked in the middle of the street, always. I think one of my down ones, if you want to say that, was Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Yeah.
Andrew Lloyd Webber, he and this young woman and two little children came in, and for those of you who knew the lunchbox, it was get it yourself. You served yourself. So this couple came in, and the woman asked if I had tea, and I did. I said, it's right over here, help yourself. If you're gonna stay here, there's mugs there you can use. So she did, she made tea for everybody and sat down, and they got donuts. And I suddenly realized it was Andrew Lloyd Webber that I just told to get his own tea.
We loved it. We loved you doing that.
Yeah, it's the way the lunchbox was. If you'd been there more than 3 times, you were a regular. And if the coffee...
You made your own change, too.
You made your own change, it was on the counter, and you helped yourself. If the coffee pot was empty, it was up to you to fill it. yourself or go somewhere else. And he made it. He continued to make it.
Does the Beaumier now, right, which is a sandwich shop, have any vibe that's similar?
I don't think so.
I wasn't
I
sure.
don't think so.
It's still folksy, but
It's still folksy, but the
There's no
lunchbox,
newspapers there.
there's no newspapers anymore. Anywhere.
Anywhere.
There's no John Zanardi at 5:15 to 6:25.
Well, and there's
No,
no
it's there
Bill
at 8:30
Batchelder
now.
on one side and David Zanardi on the other side, yelling at each other. They never could agree on anything. And interestingly enough, they both ended up at Chesterfield as best friends. But yeah, it was kind of a congregating place, I think.
Can I tell that story?
Sure.
I had a friend that came down to visit a friend of mine in town, and she showed up really late, and she parked downtown. There's no one around. It's late at night. She parks downtown and sleeps in her car. So she wakes up in the morning. She calls Sonora, the woman who she's to visit. She goes, "I'm here in Chester. I got in late last night. I slept in the car, and I don't know where I am." So I got on the phone. I said, "Well, what do you see out the windshield?" "I think I'm at the Democratic National Convention Center." I go, "I know you. Turn around, take a left at the stop sign, and go up the hill." Exactly what it was.
Yeah, we were Democratic headquarters for a long, long time. But anybody could come in. And everybody did. One thing that we did start at the lunchbox, and I think it was with John Zanardi's death, everybody was a regular. Everybody had their own seat. And God forbid you sat in somebody else's seat. But when John passed, we started doing memorials to our customers. And for a week, we would drape their chair in a black cloth, and whatever was pertinent to them, we would put at their place. Whatever they normally would eat, or what they liked to drink. Several of the customers kept a bottle of whiskey in the back room so that they could have a little shot in their coffee.
They still do that, Charlene.
Do that. But we started doing that for the regulars.
Because we had regulars too.
Yeah.
I don't think we ever memorialized them, but there was, remember Thelma Abbott?
Oh, God, yes.
Right, wasn't she lovely? She always had a certain table, ate by herself. And, what, Thelma Abbott? She owned the Abbott Company, which was, they were requisitioners for the Army for supplies. Yeah, we had a lot of.
I worked for them.
You did, there you go. Isn't that great? Every year she sent me this beautiful calendar from the Met, I'm sure, right? Oh,
That's what she did.
I still have one. Yeah, so there were local regulars in Restaurant du Village too.
All through town.
And his dad, very big on the soup and salad combo when we serve lunch.
Well, now it's time to talk about the ham and cheese croissant at your bakery. Doreen and I were at 1 Maple Street for a period of time at Joslow Computer Systems, and it was at the same time that you had your patisserie.
Where Gather is now, we had that as that was our bakery annex.
And right around, I don't know, about 9:30 is that you could just smell the croissants kind of coming our way. So I used to wait, and then when it was time, it's like, is the newspaper here? Well, okay, is the newspaper here? Oh, the croissants ready, the croissants ready. That was one thing. The other thing, and part of this has to do with community, the sense of community, which is just so neat seeing all these people here who, this is our community, right? So restaurants are part of that community, part of that life. At 5:15, we had National Theater of the Deaf here that had to come under financial duress due to some thievery. And at 5:15 in the morning, I was sitting with David Hayes at your restaurant. He says, "Well, I have a little problem." And for the 45 cents, the coffee was a little short one, 45 cents. We're sitting here, and he opens up the Washington Post, and it says theater is going to close because of all this problem. He said, "Here's a little problem." And then so So in coming and staying with that, a couple of months later, I'm dealing with that at 5:15 in the morning instead of talking to David Hayes. I would sit there and get from the police chief what happened that evening. Sorry about that, because she'd give me the police report because we had any time maybe 30 or 40 deaf actors and actresses around the neighborhood, and you knew everything. So by the time I started, first thing in the morning, I had the rap sheet, courtesy of Charlene.
And I want to say, we lived above the restaurant for the whole time we were there, so we were part of the community. And when we first got started, I mean, we never forget, we helped with the road race. We made soup au pea stew, the French like minestrone, up in the apartment and lugged the thing down. And there's photos of you bringing sausage to be grilled down at the finish line. Yeah, it was for the road race, but we lived in town, so we were definitely present.
We also had a condominium at Stratton Mountain.
That's irrelevant, but.
Not quite.
Could you just raise your hands if any of you work for any of these restaurants that you see? Just raise your hand.
I worked for 3.
Oh.
I work for all of them and also Fiddlers.
Whoa, bonus benefits.
You work for all of them.
Any more questions? I'm gonna say, I never worked for any of you, but my son David Hull worked at the wheat market, and he is still making your chicken and gravy. The country store that he owns, because he calls Dennis and says, how do you do this, and how do you do this? So,
He was a very good student of the business. I would call that. He would come in after school and sit down at the table there and have a bag of bagel chips for $5 and a root beer soda. And he sat at the same table, talking about dedicated tables. He had a dedicated table there, and he was just a neat young man to talk to. He'd come in the afternoon and I'd be there by myself or whatever, and I'd chat with him, and it was just a charm, a real charm to know. And so one day when Dennis was taking the place over from you, I was talking to your son. When Dennis was taking the place over, I talked to your son, and I just said, David Hall, I wrote down the phone number. I said, good kid. Right? That was it, good kid. And in later years, I never said smart kid, I never said fast kid, I never said bright kid, I said good kid. So I had deniability. You know what I'm saying? You hired him, he's a good kid. And he proved to be a real good kid.
I wasn't looking for that. Always. Does anyone have any other questions or memories of the restaurants that you want to share? I mean, we're saving this for posterity, so we have a tape going.
I have a comment
Okay.
for John.
Oh, wait, take a microphone, please.
Or, yeah.
No, because it's being recorded.
Well, I worked at the Chart House a couple times, some years in between.
Yeah, stand up front to see everybody. Just,
Every time I needed a job, I'd go to the Chart House. If I had work, I was okay. I lived right up the street. And I had a moo-moo dress that kind of matched your shirt, the short sleeve, and froze all the time. It was a Chart House rule that we were not allowed to wear sweaters. So I was cold during the summer because of the air conditioning, and I froze at the front desk during the winter. And you mentioned tonight about the 2.5-hour wait. This is with people that had reservations. They had to wait a long time. It must have been the year that we broke the record of having the most people at the dinners that night. And I was at the host stand, and one guy kept coming back up to me after an hour and a half or more with a reservation. And he just kept saying, when, and I kept telling him, well, soon, which we were sent to say. And at one point, he jumped over the host desk and put his hands around my throat. And Dan Jarmel was a manager at the time, and he came to my rescue. So, when you talk about disasters at restaurants, that was my night of a disaster.
So we have to say who that is.
So that was Jane Bonsack back then, and she is a terrific florist, and she did our flowers.
And to your restaurant, I have another story.
Oh, okay, more. Yes, she did some flowers, weddings.
Well, in Chester, what was amazing, do I talk about it?
Pardon me,
No,
Jane, it's being recorded.
So, I was working all the time, so I could not eat at Restaurant de Village. And my best college girlfriend from Westfield, New Jersey, just could not believe I hadn't eaten at your restaurant yet. And they came up for the weekend, she and her husband, and they wanted to take me out to your restaurant on Friday, and I couldn't, I was working. So they stayed in town an extra day to wait till I finished work on Saturday to take me to your restaurant on Saturday night. And that was the first time I got to eat at your restaurant. And what impressed me was, Westfield, New Jersey is pretty far away. How many people came from New York, to come up to this restaurant to eat and turn around and go back to New York? And just have dinner and go back to New York. That says something about the restaurant.
The limos.
The limos.
Yeah. It's like, oh, they must be in Duvalage.
Speaking about the limos, I once looked out in the front, there were about 4 or 5 limos here, and I said, dear, I think we're a success.
No more questions? No more free association, anybody?
Oh, all free
What do you want to see as a restaurant in town? Oh, there.
I work for the Chart House chain.
Oh, come up because we're recording this in the future.
I think,
I worked for the Chart House chain in the mid-70s out in California. We had the same menu you did.
Oh.
My daughter loved my shirts when she was in junior high school. But I could go, I was a bar manager, and I'd go from one Chart House to another, different buildings, same menu, same format. The reason I think when I moved to Chester, I knew immediately what was going on here. No 2 restaurants are alike. And each one has its own identity and its own character. And we arrived the last day Du Village was open, which was still one of the most memorable meals I ever had. And I think there's a reason this town creates some sort of synergy that allows for individual characteristics within the restaurants. So yeah, I loved working for the Chart House, but I would rather have worked at Du Village.
Wasn't there something I ate quite a few Chart Houses in the late 60s? The location was always key. They were always by the water. Is that so? Everywhere?
Pretty much, yes. Duxbury. The question is, where are all the Chart Houses located? A quote from Dave McCord, like in the church or something. What he said? The quote from Dave McCord, who said Chester was number 9 out of 68 restaurants. So Dave was executive vice president overseeing all restaurant operations. So we were 9, they had 68 in total. The company had gone public and had lots of money to expand. But he says that the Chester, this was like a planted question, I have the answer. The Chester was the first expansion beyond California and the mountains, which opened up all seafaring communities on the East Coast, which was Newport, not Simsbury, I don't know, Dobbs Ferry, I guess there's water there, right? The New Haven one. And by the way, Dave McCord, who did this, had just graduated the Culinary Institute in 1981, and this was his first assignment in Chester as being a trainee, a management trainee. So he and I actually did prep together, we cut meat together, we did a bunch of stuff, and he was accelerated into management. And then when he was coming back, when Chart House decided to divest their restaurants, well, not all of them, but a lot of them, Chester was on the list, and so was New Haven. I don't know, Doreen, if you remember this, I think you do. Dave came over to our house 2 days before it was being announced, and we were planning out how we were basically the base of operations for him. And then And then he bought both of those as part of his exit from the company. He bought both chart houses and had to rename them. He ran them as Sage on the Water.
John, I have some more question too. If I remember, I thought it was even the second chart house ever, and wasn't it your dad who convinced them, who reached out to the chart house people? So it was either the second or maybe the third one that existed in the United States.
No, it was the ninth. It was the first one on the East Coast though. They had La Jolla, Aspen, Coronado, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so they did have other ones, but as they said, once they had the money, they proved the concept that it was a transferable operation when they came to the East Coast and had to deal with the culture. The culture of the chart house was totally different than the culture of New England. I mean, surf's up, but they said underwater demolition people. They knew how to work as a team under tight time frames. And so everyone was trained as like if you were allergic to garlic, anybody on the floor could tell you exactly what you couldn't have, which would include the blue cheese dressing had garlic in it. You would know exactly which marinades had garlic. All the things that they teach now in business school, empowerment, all these things, you were empowered there. If someone didn't like something, you immediately could take it away. At age 18, you could just pull it away, or at age 16, you could pull it away from them and get them whatever they wanted to make themselves satisfied. You didn't have to go through layers of protocol. Everybody was interchangeable. Skip.
John, was your dad part of that initiation of it coming east?
Was he part of?
Initiation of their decision to place a store in the east, an outlet in the east?
Yes. I don't, all I remember is if anyone's been to the Inn of Chester, the big dining room, that had been a variety of things. But when Chart House was considering, was building, was refitting this place in Chester, they had their operations center in our barn. They had drafting tables and schematics all over the place, and they were then mapping out also at the same time, I believe, the Newport operation, which was the second one to go. But to answer the question is that they proved the concept, and that allowed them to expand along the East Coast, and that was, so it was key. And for some reason, Chester did extremely well compared to the other locations, which had tons more people. And as was said earlier, people were coming to Du Village, which really put Chester, I believe, on the map. Well, of course, the chicken salad. We're still known for that. But people, and then that's how people knew about Chester. It was because Du Village was like in the middle of nowhere. Du Village was like this beacon that people were coming
I just, thinking back in the past, and I'm reminded when Chart House opened, fresh grilled steaks, generous portion, teriyaki. Oh my God, I love that teriyaki. Never had anything like it. And the baked potatoes 6 ways. I don't really remember, but you get the general idea. There was the Copper Beach in Ivoryton, which had gotten national press. And it was a very truly fine dining with like 2 tablecloths and all the silverware. It had been written up in Gourmet magazine, so it was of the highest level. There was this Fine Bouche that opened just about the same time, chef like us, and very fine. Old lineman, but that was later. But let me finish painting what I want to paint in terms of where you could go to eat. So if you're going out to eat, you could go to steak houses, you could go to have spaghetti and meatballs at Luigi's in Saybrook. That was sort of, maybe I'm making a little bit of a mistake, but that's the general tone of what we had to choose from to go out to eat. So that's a really important description of how different the environment is. And in town, remind me, we were there were no other restaurants in town. Robbie's, which is now River Tavern, was the soda fountain. So it wasn't as if that was a restaurant, the bank was. So it just was so totally different because of times. Thank you, yes, the paddock home, yeah. But I mean, that, you know, I don't think most people, you know, would go out for a formal dinner at the paddock home. That wouldn't be. Oh, but there was the Cove Road Inn. Now, let me just tell you. I must tell you. My buddy came to visit, one of my college buddies. We went up where there was no threshold on the Cove Road Inn. That's up at the corner of Main, and there's a hairdresser for those of you.
There's style above is now.
Thank you. There was no threshold, that was so the bikes could get in, and there was a pool table. And then some local ladies took off most of their clothes and did some activities. They had like strippers. It was very, very, very
I remind you that this is being recorded. For
I know, it's true. I mean, this is, you know, I mean, you talked about perhaps the racing thing was needed.
We'll be talking about the Pink House next, won't we?
The Pink House?
Oh, never mind.
Anyway, that just one more painting a scene.
All right. I think we owe them a lot of